Trump said the attack on Iran is, quote, to defend the American people by eliminating imminent threats from the Iranian regime, end quote. This is a lie. Nuclear weapons are not being developed and no imminent threat exists. The US probably knows this and is using it as a cover for seeking regime change for more control of economic resources in the region. Here's what's going on with Iran's nuclear program. In 2015, Iran and the US made a deal in which Iran agreed not to develop nuclear weapons in exchange for the US lifting sanctions. The International Atomic Energy Agency said Iran abided by the plan and didn't develop weapons. In 2018, Trump backed out of the deal, saying it was, quote, the worst deal ever, unquote, and, quote, could lead to a nuclear holocaust, unquote. He probably didn't like the deal because it required sanctions to be lifted, and sanctions are a useful tool to reduce the power of a country, which Trump wants to do with Iran. It certainly did not increase the chances of Iran starting a nuclear holocaust because it actually prevented them from having nuclear weapons. However, the US and Israel do have nuclear weapons. So after this, sanctions were resumed, and Iran responded by resuming enriching uranium, and in 2023 had enriched it to near weapons grade capabilities, but not yet weapons grade, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency. In June 2025, Trump bombed Iran, reportedly to destroy its nuclear weapon building capability, and said that their nuclear industry was destroyed. And now, on February 28th, 2026, he has attacked Iran, reportedly to suppress an imminent threat of attack on the US. He is saying that in June 2025, Iran, quote, rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, unquote, and this attack was done to prevent them developing nuclear weapons. So even from him, it's a little unclear if he's claiming an imminent threat. Steve Witkoff said on February 21st on Fox News that Iran is probably a week away from having nuclear weapons capabilities. But according to PBS, the US published a report in 2025 that said Iran is years away from having missiles that could reach the US. Iran has increased uranium enrichment to near weapons levels, probably to have a chance of fighting the US, which has nuclear weapons, in a war that would most likely happen from the US invading, since the US obviously wants regime change in Iran. Their nuclear program isn't an imminent threat to the US. This reminds me of how the US government lied that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in order to invade them in 2003. This is a preemptive attack with the story about nuclear weapons being used as a cover for seeking regime change. It violates international law to start a war for any reason other than self-defense against an armed attack, according to the UN. The US has veto power in the UN because it's politically and economically dominant in the world. The US is using international law to create a world order where it can invade countries if it wants to, but other countries can't. It's violating its own rules that it holds other countries to. It's worth saying that international law isn't the best moral authority because it defends an unequal class system in which some countries are dominant over others. So something like a revolution or a violation of property rights that violates international law could be good, but international law is a useful tool to analyze the morality of attacks anyway. France, Germany, and the UK have released a statement saying they are, quote, appalled by the indiscriminate and disproportionate missile attacks launched by Iran against countries in the region, including those who are not involved in initial US and Israeli military operations, end quote, and that they will defend themselves by, quote, enabling necessary and proportionate defensive action to destroy Iran's capability to fire missiles, end quote. First of all, what the US did was not proportionate to begin with. There was no threat of attack until the US started this war, violating international law. Iran has responded by illegally targeting US military bases in Gulf states that were not directly involved in the attack. According to the UN, a state only commits aggression when it allows another country to use its bases to attack a third country. So, based on that, Europe is legally justified in defending those Gulf states. However, it also violates international law for European countries to allow the US to use their bases to attack Iran because the US's initial attack was illegal. This shows that the US and European allies are not interested in defending Gulf states because Iran's attack was disproportionate or illegal. They're interested in defending their economic and political interests in the region. Iran and the entire Middle East is crucial for oil resources. This was not a war intended to defend America or free Iran from oppression, but to install a regime that is economically favorable to US oil companies and its allies. The US killed Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei on February 28th and wants to replace him with someone favorable to the US, like what they did in Venezuela. Right now, Iran is focused on expanding the war by striking neighboring states to damage oil infrastructure and create enough economic problems to make the US stop the war. But those Gulf states, which are allies of the US, are responding by fighting back and allowing the US military more access to their airspace and territory. And the US says it will continue to fight for another month at least.